Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mike Armstrong podcast show. And this afternoon, I'm joined by William, who's come all the way from, joining us all the way from the States, from Texas. And he's from a business WK speaker. He's a speaker and do you podcast as well, William?
I'm just launching a podcast right now. Yep.
Okay, good. I thought everyone who speaks generally is launching a podcast, and that's a great way for them to go about publicizing what they do and what they talk about. So well done for that. And I started my podcast at the beginning of lockdown period, and I'm a big networker in the UK, so I got all my network on, and I decided to reach out to further afield because of the Zoom and the LinkedIn and the Facebook and all of that. And obviously, we've met during Facebook. It's been great to get you on my podcast, and I'm interested in finding out a little bit more about what you do, etc. So, for the benefit of me, as we've just met, and my audience, tell us a little bit about what you do, and we can, have a chat from there then.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for having me on. It's always interesting to talk to folks from different parts of the world. Zoom makes us a very, very tiny planet really, really quickly. I'm William Sampson. My business is called WK Speaker, and my tagline is I build better humans. I work with the DISC method of behavioral analysis, so I help people develop self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And self-awareness is, just doing exactly what it sounds like. It's just figuring out who we are. And the emotional intelligence part of it is learning how our emotions impact our abilities to connect with one another, to make decisions, how we respond to the world. And with the everything that's going on in the world right now, everybody seems to be reacting to things as opposed to responding to them. And I always go back to a quote from Viktor Frankl. He said, and the quote goes something like, between stimulus and response, man has the unique ability to think before he responds. And unfortunately, right now, what we see in the world is a lot of times where people are bypassing that middle part of it. They're just not using their brains. They're not thinking. They're just reacting to what's going on in the world. And my message to the world is, look, everything that you do is a choice. And if you'll just slow down long enough to listen to other people and listen to understand, not just to respond, then we can have a cogent dialogue about anything there is. And I was having this conversation with my daughter yesterday. She's 28, well, she'll be 28 in October. And I've always raised her just to be a very strong, independent thinking young woman. And I tell her all the time, it's, I've done that, I succeeded, but every now and then it comes around and bites me in the rear end because she's very, very liberal and I'm fairly conservative. And we have vastly different viewpoints, but we have the respect of one another that we can have these conversations and agree to disagree at the end of the day. And that's part of what we're losing. We've lost in many types of conversations in the world today is just that ability to disagree and say, look, just because I think I'm right doesn't mean you have to be wrong. That was kind of something we were talking about before we went live. It's things are different personalities. One's not right or wrong or good or bad. They're just different.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
And I love having those debates with people, and I'm quite happy to, sometimes agree to disagree or just actually, I was thinking one thing, but maybe, something you've said have made me trigger, a different thought, and I'm willing to explore that thought. And I think, myself, I'm massively into the personal development, personal empowerment space, that sort of thing. And also in the business development, business empowerment, business growth phase. So I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm always willing to listen to anyone's point of view and then make my own mind up myself, but get as much information as possible before you decide. But I think so many people take one bit of information and then see that one bit of information and then argue black and blue that they're right and the other people who have an opposed opinion are wrong. And I think that's what's splitting the world and the planet up at this moment in time. And I'm just trying to help people by educating them on all the things I've learned in my life, but also getting people to just be a bit more, considerate of other people, of other people's options, to be a bit more deep in their gaining of knowledge and information before they actually take the fight, so that, you know, sometimes, you know, people get one bit of information and then they're on one side, and it's like, well, you know, it's a bit like with coronavirus, for example. People are looking at the out and in situation of whether people should be allowed more freedom or less freedom, and they're not taking into consideration mental health, mental well-being, the economy, you know, the globe, you know, all these other things, which these things are all interconnected, and no decision and no argument really stands on its own as its own, as its own argument, as on its own debate. You know, everything is part of a much wider, bigger picture, which
Right.
is the globe or the universe, and you've got to look at all these things together and not just one dimensionally. No?
Yeah. Yeah. When we look at I mean, I'm a man of faith, and I think about, you know, what God's created with with our planet and the cosmos and all this other stuff. You know, and to think about that everything that we know could just be a speck of dust on the butt of a dog.
Yeah. I know it could be.
And
There's no arguing right or wrong. Whether it's,
who knows? Who knows? I don't know.
No, exactly.
So you see, yeah. So that's exactly what my message is to people: is look, let's just slow down. Let's take a breath. And you talked about, you know, the kind of the mental health aspects of the shutdown in coronavirus. You know, one of the things that we're seeing here in the United States, and it's probably, I'm sure it's a worldwide issue, is the issues of domestic violence and child abuse and drug abuse and alcohol and all that are just off the charts. And they're talking about teen suicides in the United States are higher now than they ever have been. They're up like 40%, just because people can't get out. And that's part of what this self-awareness and emotional intelligence is all about, is understanding how we respond to stressors. And, you know, some people, if they don't have the ability to articulate how they feel when they're under stress, they tend to have the mammalian brain, that animal brain, you know, take over, and they start throwing things, or they start screaming at people. They just don't have that ability to say, you know, hey, Mike, I'm feeling stressed about something. Can we have a conversation? No, they start throwing stuff. So that's again part of what I've done a lot of work with during the coronavirus. Is I've got a couple of presentations that I do. The one's called, and I do it free of charge for churches and civic groups and schools and whatnot. But just helping parents to understand, you know, how their kids are wired. Because if you think about the normal, what we used to call normal, is, you know, we get up in the morning, we have breakfast together, we go to school, we go to work, we come home, we have dinner together, we chase the kids around to sports, and then on the weekend, you know, we do this, but we're never together all the time. We're together in snippets. And now that everybody's together, you know, mom and dad are both trying to work out of the house, maybe somebody's lost a job, the kids are home, the kids can't go out and play, they can't burn off all their energy. So they're feeling the stress. So we as parents and the grown-ups, we're the ones that have to be able to understand our children. And if we don't understand them, we're going to misunderstand them. And, you know, again, as adults, if we don't have the ability to understand how we respond to stress, you know, we do things we wouldn't normally do. We yell more. We demean them sometimes. And we just, you know, just go in your room and just, you know, get on your device. Well, oh my God, you know, go run around the block. You know, put your mask on if you got to, but go run around the block. Get rid of some of your energy. So I teach parents how to identify personality styles within their children, you know, just based on the way they respond, they do things. Because we're all different, but we're predictably different. And when we understand that, we can understand, you know. And I use the example of my dad and myself. I'm on one corner of the spectrum. My dad's on the other. I'm very outgoing, very personable. My dad was an engineer, flew aircraft for the Navy here in the States, and then was an engineer for IBM. So you get him inside those, you know, what he knows, and he's great. But one of the things that my dad learned was that he wasn't good with people. And he shared with me when I was a kid that he and my grandfather had a terrible relationship. He said by the time that he was self-aware enough to understand that he was a big part of that problem, my grandfather had passed, and my dad was never able to fix that relationship. So he shared with me on coming home from this trip, he said, I've worked really hard to develop myself so that I can have a better relationship with your brother and you than I had with my father. So that was kind of you know, I was probably 16 or 17 years of age at that point, But that's something that stuck with me my entire life. And then fast forward more years than I'll admit, and I start studying human behavior, and I look at it and go, oh, well, there's Dad, there's me. And that's why, that's why we butted heads a lot of times as a kid. But my dad was a lifelong learner, just like I am. So.
Yeah, exactly. But it's important to be self-aware, and that's why. But the more you start learning, most adults don't learn after leaving school, if you like. Very few people actually ever read more books and educate themselves further. And once you actually start doing that as an adult, not just because you're forced to do it because you've gone to school or your parents have told you to do something or whatever, you actually start learning about things you want to learn about. Once you actually start opening your mind to the possibility of knowledge and information, you realize how little you do know. And so therefore, once you start that journey, it's a never-ending journey. It can never end. It's infinite. If you want to keep learning, there's more information out there, and you can drill into different areas, etc. But the more you learn, the more you understand, the less you know, and therefore the more you're willing to listen to other people's opinions and points of view and etc. Because you don't know everything. And unfortunately, the people who don't do that journey, they think they know everything because they've learned everything they needed to learn in school. I was taught everything I needed to learn. They don't realize that actually life's a lot more complicated and deeper than what they can cram into a few years in school. And they're not willing to learn. So, well, I'm told black and white that this is the way it is, and that's why my view is shaped this way. And anyone who has a different view must be wrong.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of things that shape that. Part of that is just our upbringing. It's our life experiences, it's our personality style. And again, that's what we're talking about perspective up here. I break it down into, what's your skill set? What are your natural and developed skills? What's your story? What's your experiences? What have you done throughout your life? What's life thrown at you that you've excelled at, and what has life thrown at you that's knocked you on your butt? And then what are your values? What's important to you? And the last part of that is, what's your personality style? How do you naturally see the world? Some people have to think about things before they talk. So they'll and that's my dad's personality style. He'll get an idea in his head and he'll go think about it and read it before he'll have a conversation about it. And then there's people like myself on the other end. We speak to process. So there's less elasticity between thought and verbiage than there is from the personality style. So I may talk in circles for a while, but I'm figuring it out as I'm going. So just understanding that there are people that process things differently than we do, and understanding that we're different, but being different is okay. That's how we start to develop empathy. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think is sadly lacking in the world today, is just empathy for other people's situations.
Yeah, definitely. And also, there's still this thought process, I think, from old caveman days and stuff about resources being scarce, and therefore people having this protectionist sort of outlook, and I'm not going to share anything with you, I'm not going to help you because it's going to affect me, and therefore I'm not going to listen to you and your point of view and your side because that might affect me, and people are just trying to protect their own knowledge, their own self, their own groups, if you like, and therefore that's why groups of people attack other groups of people, etc. Because they're like, well, you're not my group, I'm protecting my group, you're a different group, I'm going to have a go at you. And actually there's a lot that they can learn from other groups, other people, other cultures, other ways of doing things. And the more enriched you can make yourself with knowledge and experiences and whatever, the more that empathy comes and more understanding comes, because you've surrounded yourself with much more experience, and you're able therefore to see things from different perspectives and different point of views, and understand where other people are coming from. And ultimately then that's what leads you to be able to better decide how to deal with situations, because you're thinking about it from all angles and all perspectives, and not just one perspective where you could be missing what you're seeing, or seeing things completely the wrong way, or in reverse, or upside down, or back to front than somebody else, just because of the angle you've gone in at.
Right. Well, it's like we talked about earlier, and I'll use the example now. If we're having a conversation And this pen is the issue that we're talking about, and everything that you're describing is this nib. And what I see on my side, it has no nib. Then if I'm just listening to respond or react to you, I'm thinking you're talking about something completely different. I think you're out to lunch. But if I listen to you long enough to realize that we're actually talking about the same thing, we're just seeing it from a different perspective, then we can have an open, honest conversation. And there's not a problem in this world we can't solve if we'll just listen to each other. Yeah. And like the thing I say often is, let's listen to understand, not listen to respond. I coach a lot of people on just basic communication. There's a book that's written by John Maxwell. It's called Everybody Communicates, But Few Connect. And that's a basic primer that I use for, anybody that's trying to better themselves in the business community, that ability to learn to connect with other people. And it's 5 principles, 5 practices, and it's really basic stuff. And it's all about, it's not about me, it's about you. And if I can understand, I already know me, and if I can understand you better, and if you come with the same viewpoint, I'm trying to get to learn more about William. William's trying to learn more about Mike. Then we learn more about each other. Now we either find out we've got things in common that we can work on together, or we have different skill sets. And the beauty of it is, once we start learning that, and we understand who we are, people that have different skill sets are not a threat to us. They're a supplement to us. And that's another issue that I see in the world, is that people feel like if somebody else is good at something else, that means that takes something away from me. Well, that's crazy. That's crazy. I'm not a detail-oriented person. So if I'm working on a project that requires a lot of detail, I can probably get through it, but I am much better off finding somebody that I can join up with that
someone
likes
like
that kind of work.
Someone like your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I think about is with spreadsheets. Give me an Excel, I can do it, but man, I'd rather take a knitting needle and a home lobotomy kit. It comes down to highest and best use. When we have that self-awareness of that we're okay with who we are. And I teach this to kids. I actually do a leadership academy for kids that are going from elementary school into middle school. Call it Junction 56, because here in the United States or in Texas, the kids that go from 5th to 6th grade are going from elementary school into what we call middle school. So it's helping them at a younger age to develop that self-awareness. And one of the things that we find is it gets rid of bullying. Because if you got a kid that's self-aware and a bully comes up to him on the playground and says, "You're this, what, or you're whatever," the kid goes, "No, I'm not." Game over. He's like Teflon. The bully's diffused. But if the kid doesn't have good self-awareness, or doesn't have a good self-esteem, then they start internalizing that, and they go, "Well, maybe I am. Maybe I am not very very nice, or maybe I am ugly, or maybe I am fat." Well, okay, I was a fat kid. I didn't like it at the time, but I'm still a big guy. But you know what? I'm okay with the skin I'm in. And what I also have learned is that if I want to change it, I get up and go walk in the morning. I don't eat that second, piece of chocolate at night. I don't have an extra glass of wine or pint of beer. It's all under my control. And that's a large part of what I teach people is, like I said about Viktor Frankl earlier, between stimulus and response, man has the unique ability to think and to change the outcome. And again, with younger kids, getting younger kids to understand that. One of the quotes that I get young kids to dig into, it's pretty deep, especially for young teenagers. But it's something a friend of mine and I came up with over dinner one night. And the quote is, your circumstances are no more responsible for your results or your actions than the mirror is for your appearance.
Nice quote. I like that.
And man, you get young kids to start digging into what does that mean to them, and you get 2 or 3 or 4 of them together in a group, and they start having that dialogue. And it's really empowering to them to go to understand and to get inside their head that, you know what, all I got to do is think things differently.
Yeah.
So there's another book by a guy named James Allen that was written, well over 100 years ago now. It's called As a Man Thinketh. And there's a number of good pieces in there. And there's one of my favorite quotes, and it's just escaping me right now. It'll come to me. But
have you read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
Yes. I was gonna say I was reading at the pool over the weekend.
Yeah. Sounds like a similar sort of book, similar sort of time frame, written 100 years ago, whatever. All about the power of the mind, the power of. I'm big into. I like Brian Tracy. The psychology of sales, the psychology of success.
Yep.
Million dollar habits or something.
Oh, yep.
Eat that frog. Yeah, because I'm big into psychology and basically whatever the brain, wherever the brain can conceive, it can achieve.
Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Bruce Lipton, and there's a book that he wrote called The Biology of Belief.
Yeah.
And he's a biologist. I mean, his training, he's a biologist by training. He taught at the university level and everything. But he's all about how to retrain the neural pathways to change behaviors. So doing it at the cellular level.
Yeah.
The first half of the book, for somebody like me, that's a real, the 10,000-foot level guy, the first half of the book is all about the biology and all that. It's a really difficult read.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a science book at the beginning,
Once you get into the last half of it, and he starts with the application part of it. It's fascinating. It's a great book to add to your collection.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of audio books, so if it's on audio, I'll listen to it, because I'm not patient enough to sit there reading, because you have to just do that on its own. I tend to audio book whilst I'm exercising or cooking or other things.
That's an interesting thing. One of the things you said earlier, and I want to go back to, is you said most people after they leave formal education rarely pick up a book, and it's an astounding number of people that never read an entire book in their lives after they leave school. And the amount of knowledge that you can get, like I'll probably never sit down and talk about Bruce Lipton, for example, but I can listen to his book, or I can read his book, and I can get his knowledge from there. So I actually made the conscious effort this year. I got rid of my satellite radio.
Yeah.
So anytime I'm in the car, I've got it, right here on my phone.
Yeah.
I listen to books. I've been through almost 30 books this year on Audible.
Yeah. I've done about 14 since the beginning of lockdown. So yeah, that 3 months, that I didn't do it at the beginning of the year would be, where you've done your other half, if you like, you've been doing slightly more than me. But yeah, you can learn so much just in what I call dead time.
And if you can pick up one idea, one thought from one of those books, from each one of those books,
yeah.
And if you just do one a month, so if just not to overwhelm people, but if somebody would just listen to one book a month on Audible, or read one book a month, that's 12 books a year. That's 12 new thoughts that you didn't have before. And it's one of those things that it's an exponential growth.
Yeah.
Because everything that you don't do, you've lost that growth forever.
Yeah. In addition to the 14 books that I've done, I'm constantly on YouTube, watching YouTube videos, etc. Yeah. I read a lot of blogs. I'm on social media reading stuff as well. Yeah. Plus, I do networking on a Wednesday with, I do it with a couple of companies that do different events, and they both have events on a Wednesday evening with masterclass people. So they'll go through and give you an hour. I'm on about people like Les Brown, John DeMartini, Sharon Lecter, Mark Victor Hansen, Kyle Wilson. I've listened to them all, Brian Tracy's been on, Jarek Robbins, So literally it's like an hour every week, and some of them have two, so it's 2 different hours.
Yeah.
And so literally since the lockdown, I've probably heard, I don't know, 30 to 40 speakers speak an hour a time, on top of those 14 books, on top of, all the YouTube videos and the motivational quotes and the odd podcast here and there, and listen to my own podcast back. So I do 45 minutes chat and I listen to some of them back, and just as, because I'm learning constantly. The reason I started my podcast, because I wanted to learn how to be an awesome podcaster on my mission to becoming a global speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done over 500 episodes since the end of April.
Wow.
So,
Awesome.
so I'm really getting out that content, because I believe in 10x, in thinking big and taking massive action, and just, doing something that other people cannot do, so that I can speak on a stage about things other people cannot speak about. Yeah. So finding my own niche and carving out my own niche.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just, I'm a lifelong learner, and since I've adopted the personal development space, which has been more, the last 4 years and stuff, and learning at the intensity level that I'm learning, I'd say I knew nothing as a lifelong learner in comparison to what I've learned in the last, 3-4 years, and that is, it's all, it hasn't cost me anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just all there to be obtained.
And one of the things I'm trying to think, I guess this is in Patrick Lencioni's book, when he talks about, mastering something, he talks about that 10,000 hour mark. And it's just like Earl Nightingale went, back 60, 70 years ago, because back when I was first in sales years ago, I used to get this thing from Nightingale Conant. I'd get a box of tapes every month. That was, Brian Tracy and Earl Nightingale and Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and, those guys. And what Earl Nightingale said was, if you'll devote 5 years time, so 2,000 hours a year times 5 years, that's the same 10,000 hours that Lencioni talks about, that you'll achieve mastery in whatever you're trying to. And so many people start off with, okay, well, how long is this going to take? So they get, okay, well, 5 years or 10,000 hours, I'm working. Well, at some point you get over that hurdle, you get over that hump, and you go, oh, wow. Now it's not a matter of how long is this going to take, but how far can I go?
Yeah.
And when you change that mindset from how long is this going to take to how far can I go, how much can I grow, then it's an entirely different world. The landscape changes, and that's when you start to become a sponge. That's when you're actively looking for, and you're really bringing it in, and that's when the massive changes are going to occur.
Well, I've always wanted to be the best at what I do. So I look at people around me who are in the spaces I want to be in, and have mastered what I want to get to. And I look at how I can replicate it, duplicate it, and add some on top of it to even improve upon it. And I've been doing that all my life with people that I'm in a company with, or people that I'm aware of in a company or within my space or whatever. But I never really met. I wasn't introduced to the top people on the planet in the spaces that I was developing and growing in. And then all of a sudden, through a few chance meetings and stuff, I met some people who are operating at the level I know I'm capable of. And all of a sudden, it inspires you to actually think, well, this is actually the benchmark. This is the level that people can go to. And so ever since then, there's some areas in my life I'm most interested in, mastering, if you like. And so I've been learning off the best people on the planet in those areas. And the way I look at it, there's like 5, 6, 7 maybe core areas that I want to master. And so, why learn off anyone else in those areas other than the people who you deem to be the best in that space? And that's what I say to people is, you want to be learning off people. If you want to be the best, you got to learn off the best.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what listening to podcasts or books on tape or reading, that's where you have access to people. I'll probably never have an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with Tony Robbins.
No.
Or Zig Ziglar, because Zig is gone. But you can get their knowledge from other sources. You can get their knowledge from what they've written or what they've podcasted or what they've recorded. So there is no excuse for not bettering yourself. And I talk about self-awareness. You can't be aware of something until you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And then once you're aware of it, then you now have the moral obligation to do something about it.
Yeah.
So whether that's, an injustice in the world that you see, or if that's just you're growing yourself, and you have to know yourself to be able to grow yourself. And so and again, that goes back to what I teach about, understanding self first. And I use the analogy of it's like when you get on an airplane and they're telling you all the pre-flight stuff. It says, in the event of loss of cabin pressure, put the mask on the child, or you're on you before you put it on the child or the person next to you. It's because you can't give something you don't have.
Oh.
And one of the things you talked about earlier as well was that scarcity mindset. And John Maxwell talks about the concept of being a river, not a reservoir. So that's having an abundance mindset, and that we're just a conduit. And especially when it comes to knowledge, we're just a conduit. If we learn all this stuff and we hold on to it, we are not bettering the world. And we were put here to do something.
Just being like a pond, just going stagnant.
Absolutely. And I was listening to a cast the other day, and they were talking about the Dead Sea. And so many people are just like that. They hoard everything, they put it in there, and they leave, and it's just dead.
Yeah. That's the reason why I've done 500 podcast episodes since April, is because I want to be the river, putting the flow down of my information to as many people on the planet who can benefit from it. And because I've seen the lockdown as being a problem, it's like a global recession, on steroids, like, you know what I mean? I myself was a victim during the 2008 global recession. Probably cost me, it definitely cost me my finances, but it probably cost me my marriage as well. But, there was multiple things into, what ended up in my divorce. But, I seen this coming, and as soon as this kind of kicked me into action, because I thought, there's going to be a lot of people suffering during this time. And actually, it's proved out. I noticed that at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's worked out now. The stats and the figures and all that's coming out, and it's going to be a bad time for people. It's going to be way worse than the global credit crunch, because the global credit crunch was mostly affected by the financial institutions who managed to sort themselves out in a year or two, and then the knock-on effect of the people then, and the savers and various people, took 10, 15 years. We probably still hadn't fully recovered from it as a race and as a human race and these human beings. Until this happened, but this was always going to be bigger. It was a global event. It was affecting not just financial systems and whatever, but the whole of the economy, but also the mental and the health issues and all of that as well. So it's more areas of effect. So I see this as being a massive long-term effect, recession, whatever. The only thing that could potentially counterbalance it is the efficiency of technology that has happened, which could be, until you see the knock-on effect of that could be the savior of this, recession going too deep and too long. But it has to be seen. It all depends on the innovation and creativity. But I could see this as being a massive problem. And I thought, what? If I can just help people however I can in my podcast and share some information and give them some positivity and try and get them to look at the crisis as an opportunity and not a crisis. And just, hopefully they can be part of that creativity, that technology, and do something with their life that can, help the economy, but help themselves get over this problem. Then they're not, that's where I was coming from. And so what you said there was great. It's no point having all this information in your head. Share it, give it to other people, and let them benefit from it.
Right on. Yeah, and within every crisis there lies opportunity. And if nothing else, in some of the things that we're seeing out of this in families that are a little bit, that are more well adjusted, or where they've got some good self-awareness and emotional intelligence between the parents and the kids, they're using this to be able to come back to come together. They're having dinners around the table again. They're having conversations. They're putting their devices down. They're actually becoming they're becoming a better family unit. So whereas, and it's a difference between a scarcity and abundance mindset. You know, if you got a scarcity mindset, everything is bad. Everything is a problem. It's all about, oh, poor me because, because of this global pandemic, everything is bad. Well, there's little nuggets of opportunity in there for us to become better humans. Whether it's now that we've got a little bit extra time because we're not commuting, we're working from home, and so we don't have an hour commute every day. So there's 10 hours a week that we can just sit out with our kids and play, or we can have a conversation with somebody, and it's all and we have to be intentional about it. We have to develop a plan and say, okay, Mike, you and I really need to have a conversation because it's been too long since we talked. Picking up that phone and checking in on people, and just expanding ourselves and our thought process during the downtime.
Yeah, definitely. I was lucky that in that downtime, I decided to use that for exercise purposes and looking after myself, because I thought, well, if ever there's a motivation to get yourself fit, is when there's a killer virus that is can be affected and can be more harsh if your immune system's not so good, which is affected by how healthy you are.
Right. Well, in taking time to learn how to cook better foods, because the most important drug you'll ever put in your mouth is your food. I was a distance athlete for many years, and I've struggled with my weight my entire life. Started off in high school, going into high school at 240 pounds, and then my junior and senior year discovered running, and when I graduated, I was 160 pounds. So it was 80 pounds less, a third less of me when I graduated from high school than when I went in. But after my daughter was born, I found my weight was back up again. I had a come to Jesus meeting with my doctor, and my blood pressure was up, my cholesterol was up, and I'm in my early 30s at the time. So he said, you got two choices. You can die young, or you can change the way you live. So I started walking. I'd go, and then I decided, okay, well, I've walked this couple, for a couple of weeks. So let's just run for a block. So I ran a block and I walk a block. Then I got to the point where I could run 2 blocks, then 3 blocks. Well, long story short, 18 months later, I ran the first marathon. Yeah. And subsequently ran 6 more of them. And then, if one sport's good, 2's got to be better. So I got a bicycle and started cross training. So I found a sport called duathlon, which is a run, bike, run. So I think, oh, that's cool. So I did that for a while. And I grew up with sailboats, so I've always been a strong swimmer. So I was doing that as a cross training exercise. And then it comes down to, well, if 2 sports are good, 3's got to be even better, right? So I tried triathlon, swim, bike, run, and did that. So I was a competitive triathlete for 10 years. Yeah. And I managed, and there was a period of time in there where I'm working out like a madman. I'm racing, I'm competitive, but I realized I was a little heavy. Well, I had a wreck on my bike, and when I went to the doctor to get my hand set for where I broke it, I stepped on the scale and I realized I'm back to 240 again. But I'm burning calories, and I'm burning calories like none other. I'm swimming every other day. I'm lifting weights every other day. I'm running every day. I'm just doing all this stuff, but I'm using it as a license to eat like everything in front of me. So all I did was change my diet. I would grill up 6 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken breasts on Sunday afternoon, and I would have 4 times a day. I'd have a half a chicken breast, a half a cup of cottage cheese, sliced tomatoes, and steamed broccoli or cauliflower. I ate like that for 90 days and dropped 60 pounds.
Yeah.
And so my body responds really well to exercise, but it's really just changing your diet. And if we'll do that a little bit, then our immune system is an amazing tool. And if we'll do that, then we can be immune to this virus if our bodies are strong enough. But part of the problem is, and it's with anything today, with the self-development or health, people want to pop a pill and feel better right away.
Yeah.
Well, it's a process. And that's the book I'm working on right now is called Awake. And it's four principles and one promise to a better life. And it starts off with assessing your situation, welcoming new thoughts and habits, and then acquiring those new thoughts and habits, and then knocking out limiting beliefs and bad behaviors. And if you'll do those four things, you'll experience greater success. But it's a process. So anything that you want to do, if you're willing to put in the work, i.e. change your mind, change your thought process. The quote I was trying to come up with earlier was, most people want to change their circumstances, but they're unwilling to change themselves. They therefore remain bound.
Yeah.
So if they will just change their thinking, their processes, then they can achieve whatever they want.
Yeah.
And it's an easy, simple concept, but it's hard as heck to do. So that's why I coach people, because we all need a cheerleader on our side. We need somebody to help us pull that out of it. Everything that we need is already right in here. It's just we need somebody to help us think at a different level.
Yeah, definitely. And you were saying about medication, that is everyone's answer to everything. But myself, for example, I've always decided that brain power is better than the medicine. And so I've always used the power of the brain or natural remedies like food and exercise or the sun, when I've needed things. So other than toothache, whenever I've had toothache, I've taken tablets. Other than that, I don't take tablets. I went for a period of time where I hadn't been to the doctors for something like 20 odd years. Yeah. So I just don't go to the doctors, so don't get ill. Because again, optimism, I think, being optimistic and whatever is something that fights illness anyway. And if you refuse to be ill, so I've had viruses where I've been taken out for 24 hours or 48 hours, and they get worse, maybe 5 days or whatever. But I know that you just got to, drink some water, eat some toast or whatever, and then sleep for a bit, and you get over it. And I've never really had to take medication for many other things. I had overactive thyroid in my early 20s. I had to take tablets for a year, but I knew I had something wrong. We went to the doctors, etc. But when I know there's nothing wrong with me, or it's just a bug or whatever, it's just I use my brain and just sleep through it and get over it, etc. Yeah, and I think that's important to like you say, don't always rely for that quick fix or that easy fix or whatever. It's just the same as when you go exercising. When I go out on my bike, for example, I don't just do the easy route, but I don't just think, oh, look at that hill, and no, I can just stay on the flat. I think, oh, there's a hill there, and getting up that hill is going to make me better and the whole process better and me stronger. So it's about not taking the easy route and the easy option all the time, but sometimes going through the hard graft, getting those miles in your legs and in those knees and etc. etc. And so, I actually just finished a 75-day challenge, a mental toughness challenge called #75hard, which is I had to be on a diet for 75 days. I had to have no alcohol for 75 days. I had to do 2 forms of exercise every day, one outdoors, one indoors, drink a gallon of water and read 10 pages from a book, an educational book. So, most people struggle to do any of those things consistently for 75 days, but I'm doing, 5 together at the same time as having business challenges of having to do X amount of podcasts and X amount of YouTube channel and social media marketing and X amount of online webinars and Zoom events and all the rest of that. So it become a time management challenge more than a mental toughness challenge, I think. Right. But I was doing a 3-month sort of lockdown, my own routine before that challenge. So I found the 75-day challenge quite easy to do because I was already doing my own challenge as a warm up to that. But what I discovered early on in lockdown, I come up with a happiness formula, which consists of, I call it SMART happiness formula. It consists of sleep, meditation, ability to perform, which is exercise, nutrition, and hydration, random acts of kindness, and target setting, target achievement. So it's called SMART. And actually, if you get, I believe there's a formula, a ratio, which you can do those things on a daily basis and you'll become much happier individual. Yeah. And I pretty much challenge anyone to try it and see if they cannot become happier doing it, because it's all scientifically, medically proven that doing all those things will make you happy. So that's what I'm into sort of teaching people at the moment, is how to make themselves a happier version of them. And most people are doing sort of 60, 80% of this stuff, throughout their life, if you like, or throughout their week or their month, but they don't do it consistently, day in, day out. And they would be much happier if they just knew that all they got to do is stick that extra 10, 15, 20%, 30% and put it into a daily ritual. And actually they're going to be as happy as they can be, like, you know.
It's medically proven that just, you know, though you talk about the random acts of kindness, it releases, you know, the good chemicals in the
Oxytocin.
brain. Oxytocin and the endorphin. Anyway, but as opposed to the opposite, where they live in fear, where that releases cortisol and adrenaline into the system. And it's, again, it's that mindset of being either I feel like Joe Biden right now.
Don't worry about it. It'll come to you in a minute. But
it's the abundance mindset or the scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all how you look at it. And it's the ability to capture thoughts as they're coming at you, and to be able to interrogate that. There's a book by Susan Scott called Fierce Conversations, and in there she talks about interrogating reality. And one of the things I coach my clients on is when they've got something that's coming at them, a thought that, and this goes back to Frankl, between stimulus and response, man's ability to think. It's like if you're at a bit of like an American baseball game, and you're sitting right on the front row, right behind the dugout, and there's a screaming line drive foul ball that's coming right at your head. Think about that as a thought. Well, because you got great reflexes, you put that glove up, you catch it before the ball hits you in the head. Well, now you can take that thought, the analogy of the ball, and turn it over and look at it and interrogate that. Think about it. Is this going to serve me well or not? And if it's not, take the ball and throw it back to the first baseman. If it is, internalize it and you're good. But you have the ability to capture that, and that's where self-awareness comes in. If you're aware of negative things coming at you, then you have the ability to stop that, interrogate that, and then process that. And if you'll do that, there's you are now in control. And the only time we lose control, and I talk about this especially with kids and bullying and stuff like that, the only time that we lose control is when we give control up. People can't make us do anything. They can do things that stimulate us. So between stimulus and response, there are actions that occur, but it's up to us on how we respond to it. So, you know, part of the problem with us guys is we got it's all tied up in our emotions of our manhood and how strong we are. And if somebody comes at us, then we feel like we have to defend ourselves. No, we have the ability to say, first of all, is this a real threat or not? And the brain doesn't know the difference, because we're still back to the caveman part of our brain, that when something comes at us, the brain doesn't, the subconscious doesn't know if this is a saber-toothed tiger or if it's a fluffy kitten. So we have to be intentional, and we have to be aware enough to be able to take that thought and interrogate it before we allow it in. And if we can do that, then the body will not release those toxic, the cortisol and the adrenaline, and we're now in control. So the only time we lose control is when we give it up by losing by giving up our right to make that decision. And that's when people say, well, they made me do it, or I got caught up in the moment. Well, you just quit thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. The problem is too many people are happy to relinquish control of their life and themselves to other people, which is why, you know, everyone blames the government. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, I don't really care about the government. I don't care who's in charge. I don't care what they're doing. I don't really care. You know, I don't get involved in their votes. You know, I didn't care about Brexit because I don't trade with Europe, so didn't care whether we were in or we were out. What I cared about is that they'll spend 3 years making a decision that they could have made in 3 days, and then gone on to actually build the schools or, you know, do something better with their time. It's like, you know, until the pandemic came across, there was wall-to-wall Brexit for like 3 years in this country. I haven't heard anything about it since. That's how important it was. Yeah, that's how important it was, is that it consumed the political parties for 3 years constant, and nothing else seemed to be being done. And then as soon as the pandemic comes, it's just gone. It's like, Brexit who? And that's
Right.
how people decide, unless they've got anything of purpose to do, then they end up basically spending their time waffling about nothing with no purpose, because they're just filling up the time. They're trying to justify their salaries.
Yeah. And of course, we're in the middle of an election right now. We've got 71 or 2 days before the election, and it's unfortunately, I do pay too much attention to that, and I do allow it to take more of my time than I should.
Well, I'm really anti-media. I think the media is lazy. It's gone too long. It's on way too long, 24-hour media channels and all the rest of that. And basically, like you said about perspective, yeah, it's good. You know, people see things from different angles. The thing is with the news is there's often 2 or 3 angles that are interesting. And the other, 357 degrees of the circle, you're looking at the same thing. Yeah,
Mhm.
but the news wants to show you every single aspect of the 357 degrees, and then sometimes it gets 1 degree and wants to show you 360 degrees angles of that 1 degree. And it's like, it's just a white wall. It's a white spot that you're showing me every angle of the same white wall. It's like at the moment now, there's been in the UK, there was a catastrophe over grades of GCSEs with an algorithm messing up, and it knocked the school. And every time you stick the news on for literally like a week, like they'll just be interviewing people about their thought process of how the degrees affected them. And it's like, I don't really care about it's just such a small 1 degree of the story. It's not even a story. Go and find another news story and stop being lazy. That's
Well,
my perspective, like, of it.
It's like during the last election, 4 years ago when Trump was elected. I got so sick of listening to the news here in the United States, I turned it over and watched the BBC.
Yeah. Well, they're probably more fairer, because I think the American news seems to pick sides, and then just, again, gives you that one perspective. They'll only give you the one perspective from their side.
Well, and when you look at the news organizations within the world, like 80 or 85% of all news organizations are controlled by about 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
So it's all their agenda that they're being fed. So yeah, you have to go out and you have to be able to do research. You have to be able to think, and then you have to be able to defend your opinion. And understand that if you take a stand on anything, you're going to make somebody upset. But that's okay. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just different. And when we can be okay with different, then a lot of our problems just go flying out the window.
Yeah. But in the UK, they have to, if they show anything socialist, they've got to show something conservative. I don't know if they do that. I don't think America works so much like that. But for fairness, they have to do one side or the other. So therefore, you get a balanced view of the 2 main parties, at least in politics. But they don't have to give you a balanced view of positive and negative. So basically, 99% of the news is negative, and then you get like one positive story at the end. And to me, that is affecting the psychology of the people who aren't strong enough willed and independent enough to take themselves out of that system and go and look at their news in a different place. So the people who are just in a routine and just put the news on at tea time and the end of the day and in the morning, they're being force-fed negativity constantly, and that's why they're turning into pessimistic, negative people, because that's what's driving them, And I think it's irresponsible for media outlets to just, because they say, death and sadness and whatever, that's what sells papers, it's what sells the news. So therefore, they don't have the responsibility to treat human beings and their psychology fair. They're just going after the money. And I think that's more important than giving a fair, balanced view of politics, is actually give a fair, balanced view of life, and actually encourage people that life isn't as bad as what you're seeing constantly on the telly, and then manipulating you to stay in your comfort zone and not stretch outside of it because you're too frightened because of all of the stuff that's not going on, and so I think the news should be, forced to be fair in its perspective of life, but also it should be probably limited in the amount of time it's allowed to play, so that people just don't, that's all they're getting. Because I know people who watch wall-to-wall news all day long, and basically all they think that's going on in the world is, corruption, wars, the pandemic, and all that other crap.
It's from a psychology standpoint, and I think about this with parents raising their children, and we talk about the concept of how you speak to a child, and especially in the first 8 years of life, because they're just a sponge at that point. It's not until about age 8 that they have the ability to separate, right or wrong or good or bad. And it takes 17 positive affirmations to make up for one negative.
Yeah.
So if you think about that on what you're consuming, what you're feeding your brain, if every negative story that you listen to or that you allow in, it's going to take 17 positive stories just to make it even.
Yeah. I know. So even the fair balance wouldn't actually be balanced, because the negativity is much harder to overcome than the positive is. Yeah. So actually, it should be 17-1 ratio of good to bad for it to be really fair. But it's actually more 95-1. So it's 95-1 episodes of minutes in the day, dedicated to the wrong things,
Well, they went from being reporters that told us what the facts were and let us make our opinion, form our own opinion, to journalists that want to tell us what to think.
Yeah.
And once we crossed over that, it's.
Yeah, so I think there's like age ratings on films and stuff. I think there should be age ratings on news. I don't think kids should consume the news, because there's kids who are so young and frightened to do anything because of the news. There's kids now frightened to touch their family or their relatives or their neighbors because they see, you're not allowed to on the news. And so, it's going to have a knock-on effect for years to come, where all this infiltration of crap into people's brains.
Yep. And that's, what I've always used the tagline of building better leaders from the bench to the boardroom. So working with my corporate clients, building up that bench, and that's that group of junior executives where, leadership says, Mike's got promise, we need to develop him, and build, that's what I call the bench players. So, for somebody that a company sees promise in, let's start to get them developed, so that when an opportunity arises, we can plug them into that position without having any negative impact on the team. But I've changed that recently during the pandemic, is building better leaders from the breakfast table to the boardroom, because we really need to start with our kids. We really need to be hyper vigilant during all of this to make sure that we're working well with the emotional well-being of our kids. Because this is having a tremendous amount of impact on them, especially the little ones, the ones that are under age 8. We as parents, again, we can't be aware of something until we're aware of it. But once we're aware of it, it's our responsibility to do something about it. So once parents understand what this impact is on the really little ones, they need to spend extra time with them, making sure that they're okay.
I've heard a lot of children talk about the killer virus or the killer bug, and I'm like, well, actually, it's not really the levels of killer to children is very small. So children shouldn't see it as a killer virus or a killer bug. They should see it as a bug that is endangering our older people. You know, the actual truth of the facts. Like, you know, it's not really a killer bug to them. You know, in the main.
And when we look at it, at least in the United States, even with all the deaths that we've had, we're approaching 170,000. The death rate is less than 1%. I mean, this is a bad flu.
Yeah.
It's there. And one of the things I always think about is when there's something like this that gets so much attention, so much media attention. What are they trying to divert our attention from?
Yeah, yeah.
What
Well,
else?
you know,
What else is going on? You know, it's like the if you ever remember the Wizard of Oz. You know, when they finally get to Oz and they find and they say, you know, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. But you know, I'm not necessarily a conspiracy theorist. I don't think the people at the top are as clever as a lot of people think they are. So I actually don't think they're as manipulative as a lot of people do think they are. I just think they're just clueless. They haven't got a clue, and so they fall into these things, like as if they're trying to manipulate, like as if they're arch villains. Yeah, right. I think they just fall into those things and end up coming across like they're arch villains. But actually, you find, you know, there's a little old man behind the green wall, like, you know, who's just incompetent, like, you know. That's what my own personal belief is. But what I always see, I personally myself, if I was in charge, I wouldn't have locked down the country. I would have just said, listen, people above 50 or whatever at risk, they should isolate. The rest of the world should carry on as normal. That's probably how I would have done it if I was a leader in charge of this. But, you know, people will argue left, right, centre, whatever their own opinion is. That's only my opinion. I'm not medical, but I'm somebody who thinks big picture. And like I said, like you said, you know, there's 170,000 in the US. I haven't got a clue how many there are in the UK because I'm not interested in keeping score every day like they do on the news. I don't watch it. But I think it's around 30, 40, 50,000, somewhere around there it may be. But, you know, how many... I think they've probably had a negative effect on a much greater proportion than the percentage of people that have died for a much longer period of time because of the effect that they've done. Yeah, that's my own outlook on it. So, you know, I just think, you know, the amount of people, for example, who can't have their operations done because they went a bit crazy with the NHS thinking it was going to be bigger than it was over here, but it wasn't as big as they thought. But they stopped a lot of operations and stuff. So how many people are going to die of cancer and other things, yeah? How many people are going to die of mental health issues and suicide and they lost their business and they lost the economy? How many people are going to, you know, to me, I think the number, when somebody does a review and a research in years to come, they're going to realize that the response, the knee-jerk reaction response to this virus was more responsible to more deaths than the actual virus was. That's my own personal opinion.
Well, and, you know, and then they talk about having, you know, the panacea is going to be this vaccine.
Yeah.
Well, we have a flu vaccine every year that's only 40% effective. It's a 60% effective.
And they mutate. You know, these viruses mutate and stuff. So, you know, you know, so yeah, you know, and they've not been able to fix the common cold for a long time. And this is a similar sort of. It's a coronavirus. It's a similar, you know, problem.
Eat well and drink vitamin C. Get vitamin D. Get out in the sun. Get some exercise. Get some sleep. Take better care of yourself, and your body will fix this inside.
I think if the world media talked as much about those things as it did about the virus, yeah, if actually every channel, every time I stick the news on, is more corona has been for 6 months, if they'd have done that type of education into exercise, nutrition, hydration, well-balanced diet and that, sod coronavirus, we've got a much healthier population.
Yep.
You know, this is where I say the negative versus the positive needs to change. Somebody needs to come along and change the story and change and look at not what can I do to stop myself getting worse, but what can I do to make myself get better.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so again, you know, I'm an optimist and I see the positive and the opportunity in everything, and ultimately that's the message, and that's the sort of message people like ourselves have to just get out there and ultimately it's hard to beat these multimedia, you know, organizations. But if we join forces and keep sharing the message and, doing podcasts and video, YouTubes, everything like that, and hopefully the collection of the positive entrepreneurial spirited person can actually start making a dent against these, massive corporate conglomerates. But it's gonna be a hell of a battle. You know what I mean? Because we're starting off, it's a bit like George Washington against the British Army. We're starting off with a ragtag bunch of less individuals, and we've got to somehow whip them into shape,
Right.
against the colossus that's coming our way. And so we've got to be clever about it, I suppose, strategic. We've got to take the right leadership. People like I started listening to a lot of Jim Rohn, but people like Jim Rohn, Les Brown, Brian Tracy, John DeMartini. These guys are at the front, and I'm ready to pick up arms and step in their shoes when they're not in the fight anymore. That's what I see, is I'm the next wave of people to come along and try and fill those shoes to keep the fight going.
Well, in technology gives us an opportunity to have such a much bigger platform. I think about people like Rachel Hollis, for example. She's got I don't know how many million followers she has on her podcast, but she started off with just getting, helping moms with a better pot roast recipe. And then she started talking about issues other issues that they face. So it's a matter of just finding a connection with people and then just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And that will, little by little, that's how we can make a change in the world. So like Gandhi said, be the change that you seek.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to improve communication, we're trying to improve interpersonal relationships, then we just need to stand. I always say, give me a stump and a story and an audience, and I'm in my element, because I think that I have something that the world needs to hear.
Well, that's why I've done 500 episodes on my podcast, and why I'm getting people from all around the world to share the message, because I believe, we all as thinkers have something that we need to share to the world to get them to start to become thinkers. Yes. Because it's only by thinking can they get themselves out of the situation that the mass population is in, and that's of sides versus sides, self-destruction, combustion, and all this stuff, allowing these idiots at the top to get away with what they're getting away with, because nobody knows any better.
Right. And it's that herd mentality. We talk about herd immunity with getting over the diseases and whatnot. It's the herd mentality of, if it's just me and I hear this idea, that's probably a dumb idea. I'm not going to do it. But if I see that my neighbors and my friends and everybody else are going along with it, then all of a sudden it's like the violence that we see. You take probably any one of these rioters that we see in these major cities that are tearing stuff up and burning things down. You get them one-on-one on the street, and they're not gonna do anything. But because they feel emboldened because of that herd mentality to go out and tear stuff up. I mean, and then they think it's the police's fault that they're shooting back at them, or they're pushing them back when they're trying to take down government buildings. Well, come on.
Yeah, unfortunately, with every single situation, you get the renter crowd who just wants violence. You know what I mean? They just
Right.
That's all they're there for. And those people.
Crowd. I like the renter crowd word.
Yeah, but those people cause such harm, not to the opposition who they're fighting, but usually their own crowd that they're pretending to be part of. They cause more problem to those. So actually, the crowd should identify the renter crowd and kick them out, because it always weakens their position. That's what I always am conscious of, is I look at it and I think these people aren't helping you out.
And most of the people that are truly protesters are not violent. So they're not going to be the one, and the rent crowds are the ones that are violent, and they're the ones that are coming in, and they will intimidate the ones that really have the message, that are out there protesting.
Yeah,
so
and also incite them to get a bit more, vocal, a bit more violent with their message and stuff like that. And or actually they end up fighting in three-way signs sometimes as well. That happens quite a lot. You have everyone fighting each other, and it's just a free-for-all. you know.
Right.
But yeah, you know, I'm conscious that I've got something else that I've got to do at 4, a networking event in America, actually, with Your Global Partnerships. So if you want to jump on, check out Your Global Partnerships. It's a new network from the UK that's going global, and their first event is in the US. And so I'm jumping on that at 4, and I've got to have my dinner because I haven't had breakfast or dinner yet. So I'm going to quickly have that for 5-10 minutes while I do the transfer. I just want to leave it on how do people get in touch with you that are interested in your coaching and that sort of thing?
They can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook at I'm William Sampson, or my email address is william@wkspeaker.com.
Okay, great. Yeah. And obviously keep an eye out for you if they follow you on LinkedIn as well, LinkedIn and Facebook. Yeah.
I'm LinkedIn and Facebook. Yep, William Sampson. And there, over my shoulder, you can see the picture that they'll find on LinkedIn.
Yeah, good. And that'll be good to keep an eye out then, because it sounds like you may be doing a podcast soon as well. So if they like what your messages are and that, then they can follow you there as well. Yes. And if we connect more on LinkedIn as well, because I use LinkedIn more than Facebook, although I use Facebook for recruiting people into my podcast. But LinkedIn, I like to reshare people's messages, and I provide free marketing. I'm part of a lot of pods as well, and I'm into liking and engaging content and sharing some content onto my own company pages and blog, all that sort of stuff. So if I can help people out in any way, then tag me in, or, you know, once I start liking and engaging, I see your content regularly anyway. If, for example, you was to launch a podcast, then that would be a post I would, you know, put a bit of effort into sharing and stuff, because I'd be like, well, this guy's got a good message. Let's see if I can send some people his way. And I'm into collaboration, building each other up, and, you know, let's all, you know, fight the system and fight the negativity and whatever together by joining forces and sharing the message with different tones of voice and different voices, because, you know, we all got something the same to say, but slightly different in our own way, really.
Just it's a slightly different perspective. It's the same pen.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. I've never used the pen with the nib angle for perspective, and I think I might borrow that one.
Feel free to use it. I use this on when I'm doing the camera work, because it's easy to see. When I'm on stage, I use a beach ball.
Yeah. Okay. With like different colors either side or something, or different panel beach ball. Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yeah. That works better.
When you're in front of 100 or 500 people, this is easier to see than the nib on a pen.
Yeah, definitely. And my happiness formula, feel free to check that out and share it to the kids, because I'm on a mission to make as many people as I can as happy as they want to be. So, you know, it's not a secret recipe or anything like that. It's a sort of a formula I know that works. And if other people want to follow it and try and see if it works for themselves, they'll find out it does.
Awesome.
So that's pretty much it. I'm just going to say thank you very much for coming on my podcast.
Mike, thanks. I'm so sorry I was late, but we got it done anyway. So
no problem.
I look forward to staying in touch with you and helping build some better humans, right?
Yeah, definitely. And nothing left for me to say other than have a great day. I know I will. And thanks very much for listening.